push the calves out of the barn for a minute to see if I got any any calves that are just kind of looking like they're having a hard time. And I got 3 calves right now that are still kind of sucked in, and that one I have one calf that's kind of got one ear low, and I've had him on antibiotics for a couple of days, and tonight I'll probably give him another shot and see if that clears it up. But I mean, he don't look real sick. He don't look real sick, but he does look like he has a potential ear infection. And I'm keeping a good eye on that, because the last time that I saw that, the animal got like deathly ill. All right, and it was a very slow progressing disease, and the animal got very ill. But as of right now, the animal looks like maybe he needs another shot of antibiotics, and so I'll give him another shot of antibiotics tonight. But the rest of the animals, they look okay. And when you take a look at my property right here, when you take a look at this property, you're going to see that I got it divided up into 3 sections, right? I got that back part. So I'm going to call it the middle. This is the middle, the front, and then the back. So I got it divided up into 3 parts, right? And so what I'm going to do, what I will do is I will put the big animals on the back, and I'll bring home the animals from the lease property. I was at the lease property, and I think the quality of the grass is too low right now, and there's nothing that I can really do about it because the weather. Here in about 2 or 3 weeks, it's effectively just going to get so hot that the grass is going to fry up anyway. All right, even if I fertilize it right now, even if I fertilize it right now, here in about a month, in about a month and a week, and I was saying I may go ahead and fertilize maybe 20 acres of it, right? I'm not going to fertilize the whole thing, but maybe I'll just fertilize 20 acres of it, and then I'll bale the hay on it, right? I'll bale the hay on those 20 acres next month. And so I might do that. But in terms of and I was talking about the whole thing about running cattle is that the big problem is the water. All right, I may be able to grow grass on it for another month and a half. I might be able to, but the water is going to rot. Okay, the animals are going to go swimming in the water, and the water is going to rot. And if the water rots, that's effectively game over. Okay, the animals, they're not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to, do very well on that water. And so I'll be bringing my animals back home, and I figured what I will do is I will put the big animals in the back. The animals that I have in the front yard right now, I will put them in the back. These in the middle section right here, I was saying I got a few I got 5 or 6 big animals, bigger animals, not big, but medium-sized animals in the middle right here, so that they can effectively be with the small calves, and keep the small calves calm and good to go. I'll put them in the front, and then the calves that I bring home, I'll separate them out. So any animal that I think effectively is going to be here for less than 2 months, I will put them in the back. And then the animals that are getting preconditioned, I'll put them in the middle. And then the medium-sized animals that maybe need a month or 2, I'll put them in the front yard. And so that's the big idea. And I'm taking a look at my situation, and I know I've discussed this a lot. And the whole thing about my situation right now is that when I take a look at it, I would anticipate, okay, over the next 3 months, I will be selling about maybe about 28 to 30 animals. I'll be selling about 30 animals. All right, I'll be selling about 30 animals. And in terms of my overall earnings, in terms of the total amount of money that I make, because you have to remember, and I was talking about this, a little while ago, I've been talking about this for a good bit of time, but during the summer, I will actually intentionally shrink my balance sheet, just because I probably cannot run as many cattle when it's blazing hot outside. All right. When it's 100 plus degrees outside every single day, I'm not going to be running as many cattle, and if I have them out there on the back, they got some trees back there, but after about noon, they have no shade, and so they're going to be sitting there, and they got the pond, and the pond will keep them cool, but even then the pond will rot. All right, so I probably won't be able to keep animals on the back on the back pasture for very long, and so I will have to intentionally shrink my balance sheet. And but I am looking, this in terms of the middle area right here, right? In terms of the middle area, these are effectively the animals that are going to be here for a longer period of time. And when I take the bigger animals out of the middle area, that will leave me with 14 small animals, right? And the whole big idea with the business plan right now is that the 14 small animals, they still need time to really get it together, okay? They still need time. You know, I would say that they need at least another month. And so, but when I take a look at the herd, and I have anticipated that the herd is stabilized and about 250 pounds, I will go to the sale barn and I will buy 250-pound animals, and then I will add them to this herd. All right, that's the big idea. Okay, I will start adding them to this herd, and they, you know, by the time the summer's over, maybe they'll be 500 pounds. All right, maybe they'll be 400 pounds, and then you know, I can just separate them out again. And the whole thing is that I will be buying myself a new lease property, right? But here's the thing, okay, and and this is a very realistic way to look at it, because let's just look at it in terms of money. All right, let's just, because it is what it is, right? I mean, money can't buy you everything, but money can buy certain things, right? Like I can buy land with money, I can buy cattle with money, right, etc., etc. And the dollar that I make is the same dollar that everybody else makes, right? Effectively, it doesn't matter if you want to get in the cattle business, you're going to be making the same money as me, you're going to be making the same dollar as me. It doesn't matter where you go, it's all the same thing. All right, that's one good thing about money, is that it's effectively just a broader gauge for certain things. All right, because the same dollar that I make is the same dollar that anybody else makes. All right, and when you take a look at my situation, I actually make more money running cattle in my backyard than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything, and it's by a massive margin. All right, effectively. All right, I effectively make enough money running cattle in my backyard to do anything on the planet, short of being an idiot. Legitimately, I'm not lying about it. I am legitimately telling the truth. All right, honest to God. And so when I take a look at my situation, let's just take a look at it for what it is, right? I'm looking to intentionally shrink my balance sheet a little bit, and then by the time the summer is over, I will re-leverage myself. And when I do that, I'm even looking to buy myself a new piece of land, right? And so I take a look at this situation for what it is. And so, over the next 3 months, and just to put things in perspective, when I have 50 animals, I'm just about selling 10 animals every month, okay? I'm selling just about 10 animals every month. That's another way to look at it. Over the next 3 months, I would anticipate that I sell about 30 animals, all right? And these animals, they're going to hit the scales pretty hard, all right? They're going to hit the scales pretty hard. I would say that the average weight of the animal that I have brought in is probably maybe about 275. All right, it's a little bit less, it's a little bit more than 250, and it's a little bit less than 300. So I would say it's about 275. I brought these animals home at about 275. I've been raising the animal, on the average, I have been raising these animals for about maybe about 5 months apiece. All right, I've been raising these animals for about 5 months. Some of the bigger ones, right? I brought in some animals at about 350. Right, I did bring home some animals at 350. And those animals, maybe I raised them for 3 months, 4 months, something like that. But during that time period, they have put on a substantial amount of weight. All right, they have put on a substantial amount of weight. I would say that I will be liquidating animals on the average at about 650, maybe even something about 650, 700. All right, so I'll have brought them home at about 275, and I will be selling them at about 700. And next month I'll even have I'll probably have a lot of cheap hay. All right, I'll go out there and I'll fertilize about 20 acres. And when I fertilize the 20 acres, and I'll bale it probably by the middle of July, I will bale it. And I will have a lot of cheap hay. And if I have 400-pound animals, and I have some distiller grains still sitting in storage, all right, I do still have some distiller grains sitting in storage, and I can give them a hay, distiller grains, total mixed ration diet when they're 400 pounds, and they'll probably put weight on it just fine. I can give them hay and distiller grains in the morning, or I could give them hay free choice and give them distiller grains in the morning, and then in the evening I just give them the total mixed ration. But I'll have to see. But I mean, the total mixed ration does have a lot of roughage material in it, so they probably won't have a difficult time digesting it, right? I've always said that the whole thing about the cattle rumen is, if you're going to use a high grain diet, you effectively have to keep them on a high grain diet, because if you go between grain and forage, the bacteria and the pH of the rumen, it's different. And so the cattle will have a difficult time digesting their food if they're constantly going back and forth between forage and grain. So it's either you use a high forage diet or a high grain diet. That's from my understanding, and that's from my understanding. All right, like when I have these animals on grass, when I have them on grass, I supplement, I supplement a very small portion of their diet with grain. All right, like if they're on grass, and whatever, right? If they're on grass, I give them a little bit of a total mixed ration. If the grass is in an early stage of development, I give them a little bit of a total mixed ration. If the feed values of the grass have fallen pretty substantially, I give them a little bit of corn. And if it falls a little bit more substantially after that, I give them a little bit of corn and distiller grains, right? 90% of their diet will still be grass. All right, and so it's like you got to choose one or the other. All right, that's from my understanding, and it works well for me. So the whole situation is that I would be willing to bet that in the next 3 months, I will make, just about, over the next 3 months, I will make just about, just about 100 grand. All right, I will make just about $100,000 in the next 3 months. And the big thing is that, I actually, one of the big problems that I'm having right now is that I actually cannot, reinvest all of my earnings. I need more land. All right, I need to buy more land. And a very realistic way to take a look at this is that I have 50 animals right now, right? I have 50 animals. I will be selling 30, or I have 45 animals, excuse me. I have 45 animals. I will be selling 30 out of those 45 in the next maybe 2.5 months, maybe in the next 3 months. And I will use that money to deleverage myself, and I will maybe add 10 or 15 more animals to the small animal herd. All right, as the small animal herd grows, I will add more animals to that herd. Maybe I add 10 or 15 more animals to that herd. And so, I'll effectively have, I'll have 25, 30 animals. And, I will have cash reserves that I will use to deleverage myself. And the thing is if I deleverage myself and I have animals, right, then I have a lot of positive equity, right? The animals that I have probably even gone up in value, right? That's the whole thing. When I raise these animals, I raise them beyond a commercial standard. All right, when you take a look at what I'm doing and you actually take a look at the fine details, my results are actually better than the commercial standard. I legitimately do better than the commercial beef industry in terms of a generalization, all right? And so when you take a look at what I do, and that's where I make my money, right? That's where I make my money. All right, I do business with the commercial beef industry. And the commercial beef industry is where I make my money. And when you take a look at my results, I effectively do better than the commercial beef industry at large. All right, when you take a look at my results, I'm effectively doing better than the commercial beef industry in in many ways, but also there are many ways where the commercial beef industry does even better than me, right? Because when you take a look at the commercial beef industry, it's effectively just commodity trading, right? You're effectively just trading commodity. You go over to the grain bin and you'll buy commodity corn, right? And then you'll buy some whatever roughage material, right? Whatever it may be, cotton seed hulls, or whatever it may be, right? Beet pulp, right? I mean, there are all sorts of commodities, right? I mean, you could even buy hay, right? Or whatever it may be, and then you're effectively just buying commodity animals and then raising them to a fed cattle weight, right? And but there are many ways that the beef, in terms of the commercial industry, there are many benefits of having the commercial beef industry. Number one is that when you go to a grocery store, you can buy beef. All right, that's the whole thing. The thing about the commercial beef industry is, like, anytime you go to the grocery store and you buy beef, you're effectively buying an animal. Like, I know a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people, it's completely disconnected in their brain, right? Like, they don't understand that. But me, I see it every single day. All right, I understand. It is what it is. I mean, these animals effectively get eaten. All right, and so it is what it is. I mean, it just is what it is. All right. But when you go to the grocery store and you buy beef, you're effectively buying an animal. All right, you are buying a legitimate. You're buying an animal. All right, you're buying a part of an animal. I know a lot of people, it's completely disconnected in their brain. All right, they don't understand that, but it is what it is. All right, and that's what the commodity market is. When you go to the grocery store and you buy beef, you're buying an animal like this. All right. When you go to the grocery store and you buy bread, right? You're effectively buying grain. You're buying a commodity, all right? All right, America produces the most food on the entire planet. I mean, and I know it's kind of like this thing, and even me, I'm kind of fat. And and it's kind of like a stereotype, but there is a stereotype. Sometimes there is a reason for the stereotype, and that is that Americans are fat. And Americans are fat because we produce so much food. All right, we produce a massive quantity of food here in America. All right, nobody produces food like the American farmer. All right, and just to put things in perspective, I could probably feed this entire city for a week by myself on a 10-acre field with these cattle. I probably could. All right. Nobody produces food like the American farmer. And and when you're going to the grocery store and you're buying food, you're effectively just buying a commodity. All right, that's effectively what you're doing. And this is what your beef looks like. All right. And so be more whatever about it. Have more of a spiritual connection with what you are doing. Be more thankful for the food. That was once a living, breathing animal. All right. That was once a living, breathing animal. And somebody like me took a lot of time and effort to really care for that animal, and we really care for our animals. The thing about a cattleman is that a lot of cattlemen actually care more about their cattle than a vegan. All right, you got all these vegetarians and vegans, and they sometimes go on these protests and like, oh my God, but I can almost guarantee you that I care more about cattle. I care more about my cattle than a vegan does. I can almost guarantee it. All right, now talk about this in terms of a realistic perspective. If these animals were let out into the wild, like a majority of them would just flat out die. All right, these cattle, if they were just cut out into the wild, 90% of them would probably die, maybe even more. All right, the world is not Disneyland. It's extremely difficult. There are benefits to having somebody raise animals. All right, there is benefits for the animal to be raised by human beings. There are. All right, and I know it's kind of like this difficult thing to grasp, that you have to eat a living animal, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. All right, but there are benefits to having, human beings raise animals, and that, and I can almost guarantee that I care more about my cattle than a vegan does. All right, if these animals were cut out into the wild, if these animals were just let out into the wild, like 99% of them would die. The 1% that survived would be practically miserable. Wouldn't be able to find water, could barely find anything to eat. Right, I mean, legitimately, parasites, illness, right? It would be a horrible situation. All right, and so it's not like oh my God, just leave the animals alone, and then you just cut the animals out to the wild, and all of a sudden they go walking off into Disneyland. That's not how it works. All right, a majority of animals just flat out die. All right, they just flat out die, practically all of them. All right. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, all of them do, right? I mean, it is what it is, right? And so, but I mean, that's effectively, it is what it is, all right? And so that's what I've determined what I will do. And, when I re-leverage myself, and I start to, because here's the thing. Because let's just take a look at my financials, right? And I say, well, I will probably make about $100,000 in the next 2.5 months, right? I will probably make about $100,000 in the next 3 months. I probably will. And if I took that money and I put it back into my business, right? If I took that money and I put it back into my business, I mean, we would effectively, I would effectively have to buy about 140 cattle in the next 3 months, all right? And that would be just me taking the money that I make and putting it back into my business, all right? And so, and in all honesty, I talk about this all the time. I leverage against my earnings. All right. I leverage against my earnings, and I even leverage against my assets. But when I leverage against my assets, I do it very carefully. All right. The idea of leveraging against my assets is that I put my money in, and I was talking about this a couple of days ago, but let's say that we took my exact same business plan. And instead of saying I'm going to invest $500,000, let's say I'm going to invest $5,000, right? It's still fundamentally the exact same thing. So if I had $5,000 instead of $500,000, If I had 5,000, I would take my $5,000 and I would invest that money first, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't, 5 grand is whatever, right? The whole idea is to get yourself into a situation where you are thinking about growing the money. All right, you don't want to be sitting there looking at $5,000 going, oh my God, I got 5 grand. You don't want to be sitting there going, oh my God, 5 grand is not enough money for me to do anything. You want to take a look at that 5 grand and you want to come to the conclusion that you can grow this money. And a very realistic way to take a look at this is if I had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years and with zero difficulty. Legitimately borderline zero difficulty, all right? You go and you just buy 5 cattle and you buy 1 tonnage of fertilizer, all right? That's how you do it. So the whole thing, get yourself a lease property, all right? Congratulations. And so the whole thing is invest your money first, right? I talk about this. How do I do it? I invest my money first. So if I have $100,000, or let's just say I have 5,000. Let's just say I have 5,000. I invest my $5,000 first. I stable, and in all honesty, if 5 grand was all I was talking, if it was legitimately just 5 grand that I had, I would leverage against it immediately because it's whatever, 5 grand, whatever. If, even if I completely mess it up, I can just fix the price. 5 grand is not going to be the end of the world. I might as well just leverage against it immediately because why not? So I effectively have enough money to buy 5 cattle and 1 tonnage of fertilizer. If I leverage against that 1 for 1, I would be able to buy another 5 cattle and 1 more tonnage of fertilizer, right? So I would have 10 cattle and 2 tonnages of fertilizer. And then, I just raised the 10 cattle. Let's say one of them dies. Let's say one of them dies. The 2 tonnages of fertilizer grows me 10 acres of grass, effectively for 6 months. For 5 months, and during those 5 months I'm able to take the 9 cattle that I have from let's just say 200 pounds, 250 pounds, all the way up to whatever 650, right? All the way up to 650, something like that. And so I have these animals and I have them, whatever, and then I took these 250 pound animals, I took them all the way up to 650. Congratulations. When you sell them, you'll probably just about double your money, something like that. I mean, you'll have enough money to buy maybe you'll sell your 9 and you'll have enough money to buy like 16. All right, maybe not quite double, but just about. You'll have enough money to buy like 16. You pay the bank back their 5. You legitimately just took your 5 animals worth of money and turned it into 11 animals worth of money within 5 months. Right, you do that you do that 2 times a year. Realistically, I do it 3 times a year because I really pushed out the efficiencies on the gains. All right, I really pushed the efficiencies on the gains. When you take a look at how much my cattle gain on a daily basis, my cattle actually borderline gain, as good as the commercial beef industry. Borderline, sometimes even better. I'm more on the top end of results. All right, when you have a 350 pound calf and you're able to put more than 3 pounds, just about 3 pounds a day on that calf, that's very good. That's incredibly good. And the thing about my situation is that I am able to actually do it by growing my own feed. That's phenomenal because now the costs of gains are extremely low. I don't even need any equipment. I just grow the grass and I put the cattle on it. Right? That's incredibly good. And just to put things, I talk about this all the time. For me to grow enough grass to feed about 40 cattle, 500 pound cattle, 8 months out of the year, it costs me about $350 a month. All right, if I spend about $350 a month, 8 months out of the year, I can legitimately grow enough grass to feed about 35 500 pound cattle. All right, and then I supplement their feed, I supplement their grass with a little bit of grain, and depending on what the feed values of the grass are, I will change the grain. All right, and that's how I do it. All right, and when I do that, my numbers are incredibly good. When you just, it doesn't matter however which way you want to cut it. You want to take a look at how much biomass my grass accumulates. You want to take a look at how much weight my cattle puts on. You want to take a look at how much money my business makes. It's all the same thing. My results are phenomenally good. Borderline like what in the world incredible. And just to put things in perspective, my business right here, this 10.5 acre field, I'll actually go and bring home all of my cattle from my lease property. This 10.5 acre field right here will make me about $100,000 in the next 3 months. And I will take that money and I will reinvest it back into my business. I've spoken about this all the time. I speak about this all the time. You know, after a certain point, you can't do anything with the money. You know, there's nothing that I can really do with that kind of money. And I've taken a look at it and I have decided that I might as well just let the money grow. And if I want to buy anything, I will just buy it. But me, I'm not like in a miserable situation. I'm not like going, oh my God, you know, I'm not gonna eat food. I'm not gonna have a car or whatever because I want to save money. I'm not like pinching pennies, right? You know, I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, you know, I'm not gonna use my air conditioner so I can save $20. If I want to use my air conditioner, I'll use my air conditioner. If I want to buy some food, I'll buy some food. You know, whatever, right? You know, I don't worry about money. All right, that's one of the big benefits. I was talking about this. You know, I talk about this all the time. You know, in my financial situation, one of the big benefits is that I legitimately do not have to worry about money at all. That's a very good feeling. I think a lot of people don't talk about this, but you know, the whole thing about my financial situation is that I legitimately do not have to worry about money at all. You know, and another way to take a look at this is like, if I legitimately felt like, you know, I don't want to be in the cattle business anymore. I don't want to be in the cattle business anymore. I just want to go and I want to fry chicken at Wingstop. I want to fry chicken at Wingstop. If I just liquidated all of my assets, and just put that money in the S&P 500, and I just went and I started frying chicken at Wingstop for $15 an hour and rented myself an apartment, a nice apartment, I would still make like over $15,000 a month. You know, granted that the S&P 500 produced like an 8% return a year. That's what I'm, effectively, I don't have to worry about money at all. If I legitimately took all of the money that I was investing, if I took all of that money and I just said, you know what, I don't feel like being in the cattle business anymore. I'm just going to take all of my money and I'm just going to put it in the S&P 500 and I'm going to go fry chicken at Wingstop. Even then, I would effectively have unlimited money. You know, granted that the S&P 500 produced about an 8% return a year. It doesn't matter. All right. After a certain point, the money does not do anything. And in a realistic sense, you know, why would I stop running cattle, right? You know, when I run cattle, I make more money than the entire planet by a massive margin, just about. And just to put things in perspective, I would be willing to bet. I would bet right now that over the next 3 months on my 10.5 acre field, in the next 3 months, I will make just about $100,000. Just on my cattle business. I would be willing to bet, and I'm not lying about it, honest to God. That is legitimately what my numbers are going to look like. I will be shrinking my balance sheet. I will have cash reserves. I will add on to the herd over here, right? I will separate the animals out, and I will add on to the animals over here. You know, once the animals hit a little bit of a higher weight and they are stabilized, I will add animals to this herd, you know, the small herd. I will separate out the animals. They will go up in value, granted that I continue to do my part. I will still have cash reserves. I will deleverage myself, and et cetera, all right? I mean, when I reinvest my earnings, my money is going to go ballistically vertical. I am telling you right now, it is going to happen. You know, it's just a matter of time. It is a matter of when. It is not a matter of if. And I said, if something happens that puts me back, and I said, you know, if something happens and I'm like, you know, I think I need about 2 months to get this situation squared away. I need 3 months to get this situation squared away, and then I'll be back on track. If something like that happens, I will legitimately say it. Something happened and I'm behind by 2 months. Something happened and I'm behind by 3 months. All right, and I've already said that one of the, and I don't know if this is, it's whatever, but, in terms of my financial situation, I don't ever put myself anywhere near zero, all right? Because I don't put myself anywhere near bankruptcy or anything like that ever, right? In terms of a realistic sense, I make about 5 times more money than I spend. What do I do with the money? I grow my business with it. I make about 5 times more money than I spend. So if you know, and in real, and you know, I make about 5 times more money than I spend. I don't put myself anywhere near bankruptcy ever. All right. That's, you know, and I don't know if that's I don't know if that's good or if that's bad, but I don't do it. All right, I know, you know, and I don't leverage myself to the eyeballs ever. All right, you know, sometimes I hear some financial stuff and they're like, oh my God, just go into, you know, whatever, right? Leverage yourself to the eyeballs, and you know, but I don't do that stuff. All right, you know, in term, you know, and you know, I don't ever risk losing money. If something were to happen, like 50% of my herd were to die, all right, you know, that would set me back maybe, you know, 7 months. It's not going to put me in a situation where I go bankrupt and then, you know, right? It's not even close. If 50% of my herd died, and granted that, you know, the other 50% of the herd, you know, is effectively, you know, stabilized and has gone up in value because, but, you know, et cetera, maybe it puts me back, you know, 2 or 3 months. It's not going to maybe it puts me back, you know, if it's horrible, maybe it'll put me back 5 months. But it's not gonna put me in bankruptcy, right? It's not gonna put me in bankruptcy territory. Even if I lost half of my animals, I wouldn't even get close to losing money. All right, that's how I run my financials. When I run my financials, the way that I, you know, utilize my balance sheet, and the way that I leverage against, you know, the way that I invest my money and then I leverage against it, etc., I don't put myself anywhere near zero. Ever. All right, I don't ever put myself anywhere near zero. All right, you know, for me to lose money, I don't even know what it would take for me to lose money. Like, I mean, legitimately, for me to lose money, I would have to start going, like, I would legitimately have to start doing drugs. I would have to start drinking all the time. I would have to start going to the casino. That is legitimately what it would take for me to lose money. I'm not gonna lose money in the cattle business. When you take a look at me in the cattle business, my cattle business is effectively like it's borderline like what in the world incredible. Like, I legitimately have some of the best results on the planet for anything. You know, when you take a look at what I'm doing, I legitimately managed to outperform just about a majority of the commercial industry in a backyard by myself. I'm not gonna lose money in the cattle business. You know, for me to legitimately lose money, it wouldn't be with farming. I wouldn't lose money farming. It would have to be like I started doing drugs. I started drinking all the time. I started going to the casino all the time. If I started doing something like that, I could lose money. But I'm not going to lose money in the cattle business. I'm not going to lose money farming. Zero chance. It's not going to happen. Even if I lost half of my animals, I could recover and stabilize myself within 3 months. All right? I mean, I'm not going to lose money farming. I don't lose money farming. Farming makes me a ballistic amount of money. If I stopped farming, I would hemorrhage hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Millions of dollars of my net worth would evaporate. Legitimately. I don't lose money farming. Farming does not cost me anything. Farming makes me a massive amount of money. All right, you know, I'm not going to lose money farming. All right, you know, for me to legitimately lose money, to legitimately enter like bankruptcy territory, I would have to like start doing drugs. All right, go and do something horribly idiotic, something. I mean, you know, something like that. It wouldn't be because I wasn't able to farm. In terms of a realistic sense, me, when I farm, I legitimately have like some of the best results on the planet. I may legitimately be the only person on the planet that can do something like this. Not can, but does, right? At the end of the day, if you are born with average IQ, you can learn how to do 95% of this, 98% of this, right? Can is not an accurate word. It's just going to take a long time. It will take a long time. All right, and it will take a long time. There is no skipping the work. No, but when you take a look at what I'm doing, I effectively have some of the best results known to man. And I managed to do that in a backyard by myself. All right, and I don't put myself anywhere near bankruptcy at all, ever. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know, but I don't do it. All right, when it comes to money, I invest my money first. I stabilize my investment. I take the appraisal value of my investment, and then I leverage against it. All right, I appraise my assets, and then I leverage against the stabilized asset. And I don't ever leverage myself more than 1-for-1. Realistically, I leverage myself maybe 70%. All right, and and even if I lost half of my animals, it would put me back 3 months. All right, the chances of me losing money farming are 0%. I legitimately may be one of the best farmers on the entire planet. When you take a look at my results, just in terms of whatever it may be, whatever it is that you want to, whatever it is that you want to, whatever, I effectively managed to outperform borderline the commercial average. I actually managed to outperform the commercial average in a backyard by myself, and I did it for a fraction of the cost. Granted that I don't have the scale that the commercial industry has, right? The commercial industry, they got, a lot of these feed yards even got over 100,000 animals, right? And I don't scale like that. All right, but in a small setting, right? And in terms of just it is what it is. And in terms of individual earnings, the sheer amount of money that I bring home by myself. All right, in terms of the amount of money that I bring home by myself. All right, and when you include the fact that I started this business by myself. All right, and you have to include all of these things because it is what it is. I legitimately grew my business by over 1,000% in the last 2.5 years. And I am reasonably anticipating that I grow my business by more than 200% in the next 6 months. I will grow my business by more than 200% by the end of just this year. That's what I reasonably anticipate. That is what I am telling you the truth. I'm taking a look at it. I understand what is happening. I am making a drastic amount of money. I will more than double the size of my business by the end of the year. All right, and when you include that, all of that together, when you take a look at my financials, I legitimately have some of the best financials on the entire planet. Like a 0.000000001%. That's legitimately what this is, right? It is what it is. All opinions aside, nobody cares about an opinion. I actually do this stuff in real life. Over the next, 3 months, I will probably sell about 30 cattle. All right, and they're going to be big. They're going to be big, all right? These animals, they're going to hit the scales real hard. All right, and I'm gonna make my money on them. All right, and these animals, I haven't really been picking any plainer animals. I've got a good set of animals, etc., etc. All right, and I would bet that by the end of the year, I more than double the size of my business. I could actually more than double the size of my business in the next 3 months if I just took the money that I made and reinvested it. But if I did that, and I would not even use any leverage, but if I did that, I would have to buy about 140 cattle in the next 3 months. 120, 140, something like that in the next 3 months. And I don't, where am I going to put 120, 140 cattle? I need to buy myself a new piece of land, right? And if I'm going to buy myself a new piece of land, I need to deleverage myself, to get myself, ready, to go and talk to the bank about it. And I know people say, oh, well, credit don't matter. And, but at the end of the day, I got the summer coming up. All right, I got the summer coming up. And if I deleverage myself, my credit will go over 800. All right. My credit score will go over 800. And then, I could probably get a better interest rate. And I might as well do that because the summer months are coming up and it's going to be blazing hot. So I might as well. All right, I'm just going to take my money. I'm going to deleverage myself. And then I will re-leverage myself. And when I re-leverage myself, I'll probably, I won't be buying 140 cattle in the next 3 months. I'll probably be buying closer to maybe even 200. Because I will have assets. Those assets will have appreciated. They'll probably be ready to go for market. I will have earnings. I can leverage against. I will reinvest the money that I make first. All right, so I will have my money, and then I will also have my earnings. I will reinvest that money, stabilize the asset, appraise the asset, and then leverage against it. And when I do that, you know, we're effectively talking about me buying like 200 animals in the next 3 months, something like that. All right. And, you know, and I've taken a look at it. I understand what's happening. I understand what's happening. All right. I've taken a look at it. It is what it is. I'm not lying about it. I am telling you the truth. God be my witness. And, you know, I've taken a look at it. I understand what's happening. And, you know, and I've decided that it is what it is. All right. I'm not a malicious person. I worked for it. I legitimately had to work. You know, I legitimately lived where I worked. And I worked, sometimes I legitimately worked more than 15 hours a day for months straight. But my average work day is 15 hours, and I work 7 days a week. All right, and I've always said, if you want to know what it's like to go and start yourself a farm and get these results as a first-generation farmer, then go and do it. Then you'll understand. You know, you'll understand what it means to work 15 hours a day. All right, because then you'll understand, right? You want to learn how to grow grass like me. You want to learn how to run a business like me. You want to learn how to run cattle like me. Then go and do it. All right, go and do it, and then you'll find out. It's not easy. It is, you know, it is going to be very, very, very difficult. And I give you my information for free. I give away my information for free, and I give away the best information that I can. When I first started this business, I probably could not even run 70 cattle a year by myself. I probably couldn't have even done that. My results would not have been very good, and it would have been extremely difficult. As of today, my results are extremely good. And even 200 cattle a year, is not really difficult for me anymore. Running 200 cattle a year right now is not even that hard for me anymore. And my results are incredibly good. All right, you know, this is not some, you know, nobody cares about an opinion, all right? Because I've always said this, you know, especially not me. The thing about, you know, and it's probably you know, people like me, just whatever, right? The thing is, like, if I legitimately, like, you know, whatever, right? Like, you know, like this person, whatever, and I've talked about this all the time. What's going to happen is I'll just leave, if it comes down to it, I will be rich by myself, and I will just leave everybody for dead. Legitimately, because I'm not going to be poor. All right, I'm not going to be poor. There's nothing that anybody can do or say to convince me to be poor. I've made my peace with God about it. I'm not malicious. I'm not going to be poor. All right, I've already decided I'm not going to be poor. I'm not going to be a malicious person about it. I'm not going to, go into, intentionally turn people poor, stuff. I'm not going to do that. All right, but I'm not going to be poor. If it comes down to it, I'll just leave everybody for dead. I don't save people, and I will go and be rich by myself. And, and for the right person, I would hope that when I present these things and I show you how I do it, and I am living proof that it's actually possible and I actually do this stuff in real life, that it inspires you to go in the right direction. All right, it inspires you to, to go out and put in some effort. All right, because this stuff is not something that, nobody was born to be a farmer. I legitimately worked more. There were times when I worked for more than 15 hours a day for months on end. All right, I legitimately worked more than 15 hours a day. And even today, I still work about 15 hours a day. And I live where I work. All right, so, and if you want to know what it's like, then go and do it. You want to know what it's like to grow grass like me, then go and start learning how to do it. You want to know what it's like to run a business like me, then go and do it. You want to run as many cattle as me, you want to run cattle like me, then go and do it. And then you'll find out. All right, because me, when I first started, I probably couldn't even run 70 cattle a year. My results would have been bad, and it would have been incredibly difficult. But right now, my results are incredibly good. I run 200 cattle, just about 200 cattle a year, and I can do it no problem. And I've actually decided to go and do better things for myself, right? It is what it is, all right? And I actually managed to do it. I figured, it is what it is, all right? I understand what's happening. I do very well for myself. And if it comes down to it, I will be rich by myself. Why would I care? All right, why would I care? I'll be rich by myself. I'm not saying that to be a prick, but why would I go and be poor? Opinions don't matter. I actually do this stuff in real life. It is what it is, all right? And if, the whole thing with dealing with an idiot is I don't deal with idiots, all right? I'll leave you for dead, all right? I'll leave you for dead. I'll go and, and just be rich by myself. Which I'm not looking to be a malicious person about it, but why would I be poor? I've already said that, you know, the whole thing about being poor is that when you have a poor person, they usually are going to hold on to being poor forever. Legitimately forever. Will not ever, will legitimately hold on to being poor forever. There's nothing that can be done. Legitimately nothing can be done. After a certain point, nothing can be done. It's practically a done deal. All right, you know, if you like, and it's whatever, right? And I've already, given realistic examples of how, to go out and do stuff like this. If you find yourself a lease property on Facebook Marketplace, fertilize the grass, put some animals on it. You can practice for free. You don't even have to worry about buying land, etc., etc. Right? But at the end of the day, I mean, it is what it is. All right, I'm not, I'm not a malicious person. It's just, I don't save people. All right, if I could save people, I would. But at the end of the day, once and I've always said that poor is like a negative feedback loop, and it's practically just, it's forever. All right, you'll end up, whatever, proud of yourself. You're poor and you're proud of yourself. You find other people that are, effectively poor like you, and then, you create a moron megazord, right? And then now you're all validating each other, and now it's like just this horrible death loop, right? And everyone's spiraling out, downwards forever, right? A net negative, right? And in reality, it's like, you should go out and you should actually start putting in some effort. Find, if anything, find somebody who knows what they're doing and ask them. Right? Find somebody who knows what they're doing and see what they have to say about it. All right, because, and just to put things in perspective, when it comes to the cattle business, if I only had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years with no problem. It wouldn't even be hard. Legitimately would be easy. All right, and I show you exactly. I showed exactly how I ran my balance sheet. I show exactly how I run my balance sheet. I show exactly how I appraise my assets. What kind of assets do I buy? How do I take care of these? How do I take care of these cattle? How do I grow my grass? I legitimately show all of it, right? And it is what it is. I mean, and by the end of the year, I would bet that my income more than doubles. All right, I'm being completely serious about it. I will more than double the size of my business by the end of this year. And so that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.